It's in yourself, in your skills, your relationships, your character, in building a life that doesn't depend on getting lucky or finding the next big thing. That's the only investment that's guaranteed to pay off in the long run. Thanks for listening to my story. Share it if you think it might help someone else avoid the same mistakes I made. Because sometimes the best thing you can do with a hard lesson is make sure other people don't have to learn it the same way you did. What I can tell you is this. If you're thinking about getting into cryptocurrency, or if you're already in and feeling that same excitement I felt, just remember my story. Remember that markets go down as well as up. Remember that leverage is dangerous. Remember that there's no such thing as easy money. Most importantly, remember that your real life is more valuable than any investment. Your relationships, your security, your peace of mind. Don't gamble those away for the chance at getting rich quick. Because trust me, the crash hurts a lot more than the high feels good. I spent months chasing numbers on a screen while ignoring the real person sitting next to me. I risked a relationship that took years to build for gains that disappeared in weeks. I traded my peace of mind for the stress of watching charts all day. None of it was worth it. If you're in crypto now, or thinking about getting in, here's my advice. Only invest what you can afford to lose. And I mean really afford to lose. Not just financially, but emotionally. If losing that money would change your life, don't risk it. Set limits and stick to them. Take profits when you're up. Don't use leverage. Don't put your emergency fund at risk. Don't let the fear of missing out make you do something stupid. And remember that building real wealth takes time. It's boring. It's slow. But it's real. So what about you? Have you ever been tempted by the promise of easy money? Have you made investing mistakes that taught you hard lessons? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Maybe we can learn from each other's experiences. And if you're going through something similar right now, if you've lost money chasing the dream of becoming rich overnight, know that you're not alone. It gets better. It takes time. It takes work. It takes facing some hard truths about yourself, but it gets better. The most important investment you can make isn't in any market or any coin. Sarah and I got married last year. Small ceremony, nothing fancy, but it was perfect. We bought a modest house with a conventional mortgage and a down payment we saved up over 3 years. It's not the mansion I dreamed about during my crypto millionaire phase, but it's ours. Really ours. And that feels better than any number I ever saw on a screen. We have a budget now. We talk about money decisions together. We have goals that don't involve getting rich overnight. A bigger house in a few years, maybe. Kids someday. A retirement account that will actually be there when we need it. Boring goals, maybe, but they're real. They're achievable. They don't depend on markets or luck or finding the next big thing. Mike and I are still friends, but we don't talk about investing much anymore. He lost about as much as I did, maybe more. He's doing okay now, working his way back up, being smarter about money. Sometimes we'll grab a beer and laugh about how crazy we got during the crypto boom. How we thought we were financial geniuses because we got lucky for a few months. How we almost destroyed our lives chasing something that was never really there to begin with. You know what's funny? Mike said last time we hung out, I make more money now than I ever made trading crypto, just by working overtime and getting promoted. Boring, old-fashioned work. He's right. The most reliable way to build wealth is still the same way it's always been. Earn money, spend less than you make, invest the difference in boring stuff that grows slowly but consistently. Not sexy, not exciting, but it works. Look, I'm not here to tell you that crypto is evil or that Bitcoin is going to zero or anything like that. Maybe it'll hit $1 million someday. Maybe those blockchain technologies really will change the world. I honestly don't know, and I've learned not to pretend I can predict the future. We had a lot of long conversations during that time, Sarah and I, about trust, about the future, about what really mattered in life. She made it clear that if we were going to make this work, things had to be different. No more get-rich-quick schemes. No more secret investments. Complete transparency about money. "I don't care if we never get rich," she said one night. "I just want to know that we're building something real together. Something that can't disappear overnight because you got caught up in some fantasy." Those words hit harder than any market crash ever could. I started seeing a therapist, not just about the money, but about why I'd been so desperate to prove myself, why I'd been willing to risk everything for the chance to feel special, to feel like I was better than everyone else. Turns out, a lot of it came back to growing up working class, feeling like I had to prove I was worth something, that I could be more than just another guy working in a warehouse. But you know what? There's nothing wrong with working in a warehouse. There's nothing wrong with earning your money honestly, with building wealth slowly, with being satisfied with a normal life. I just had to learn that the hard way. These days, I keep things simple. I max out my 401k at work. I put money in boring index funds that go up an average of 7% a year. Not exciting, not sexy, but consistent and reliable. I have an emergency fund that I never, ever touch for investments. I learned that lesson the expensive way. Do I still have some crypto? Yeah, a little bit. Like 5% of my portfolio, money I can afford to lose completely. Because I learned that in investing, just like in life, the most important thing isn't how much you can make. It's how much you can afford to lose. I stopped reading crypto news. Stopped checking prices. Stopped going to those Discord channels where everyone was still talking about diamond hands and buying the dip. The whole crypto community I'd felt so connected to, all those online friends who'd celebrated every pump with me, suddenly felt like reminders of my own stupidity. My coworkers started treating me differently too. Word had gotten around that I'd lost a bunch of money in crypto. Some of them felt bad for me. Others seemed to enjoy watching the guy who'd thought he was so smart get humbled. Rick, my supervisor, actually pulled me aside one day. "Jake, I don't know what happened with your investments, and it's none of my business. But you're a good worker when you focus. Maybe this is a chance to get your priorities straight." Coming from Rick, who I'd spent months looking down on, that stung more than anything. It took about 6 months before Sarah and I started talking regularly again. Another 6 months before she moved back in. By then, I'd managed to save up a few $1,000s the old-fashioned way. Working overtime, living cheap, selling stuff I didn't need, being smart with money instead of trying to get rich quick. I picked up extra shifts at the warehouse. Started selling stuff I didn't need. My gaming console that I'd barely used since getting into crypto. My nice watch that I'd bought during my peak earning phase. Some tools I'd bought but barely used. Anything to start rebuilding some kind of financial foundation. But the hardest part was looking at myself in the mirror every morning. Facing the guy who'd had everything going for him and threw it all away because he thought he was smarter than everyone else. Because he got greedy. Because he forgot that there's no such thing as easy money. She sat there for a long time, not saying anything. Then she looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "Jake, what have you done? We were supposed to get married next year. We were supposed to buy a house. We had plans." That's when it really hit me. This wasn't just numbers on a screen anymore. This was real life. This was our life. And I'd gambled it all away chasing some fantasy of easy money. I'd become exactly what I'd promised myself I'd never be. I'd become my father, coming home with empty pockets and a head full of excuses. Sarah left the next morning. Not permanently, she said. She just needed time to think. Needed space to figure out what this meant for us, for our future, for everything we'd built together. She packed a bag and went to stay with her sister across town. Before she left, she looked at me with this expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, not sadness. Disappointment. Deep, crushing disappointment. "I trusted you," she said. "I trusted you with our future, and you threw it away for what?" for some internet money that doesn't even exist. I couldn't blame her. I'd lost her trust along with everything else. The weeks that followed were the darkest of my life. I'd wake up every morning hoping it was all some horrible nightmare. But then I'd check my phone and see that balance. $847. The apartment felt empty without Sarah. I'd come home from work and just sit on the couch, staring at the TV without really watching anything. I stopped cooking real meals, lived on ramen noodles, and whatever was cheap at the corner store. Mike was dealing with his own losses, his own relationship problems. His girlfriend hadn't left him, but she'd made it clear that his crypto trading days were over. We'd text occasionally, but what was there to say? We'd both blown up our lives chasing the same stupid dream. My portfolio balance, $847. $847. From a peak of $67,000 to $847. I sat there in the warehouse bathroom, staring at my phone, trying to make sense of the numbers. How do you lose that much money? How do you go from feeling like a financial genius to losing almost everything you've worked for in the past 5 years? I called the customer service number, thinking maybe there was some mistake, maybe I could get them to reverse the liquidation. But the guy on the phone just explained what I already knew. When you can't meet margin requirements, they sell your position automatically. It's in the terms of service I'd agreed to without reading. The worst part wasn't the money. The worst part was going home that night and having to tell Sarah. She was in the kitchen, making dinner, humming some song from the radio. She looked happy, content, like she was living in a world where her boyfriend hadn't just lost their entire future. "Hey babe," she said, turning around with a smile. "How was work? You look terrible." I stood there for what felt like forever, trying to find the words. How do you tell someone you love that you've destroyed everything you've built together? How do you explain that the person they trusted with their future is actually an idiot who got seduced by get-rich-quick schemes? "Sarah, we need to talk." The smile faded from her face. She could tell from my voice that something was really wrong. I told her everything. About the leverage, about the loans, about how I'd put every dollar we had into crypto. About how it was all gone. About how I'd been lying to her for months about how bad things had gotten. She didn't yell. She didn't scream. She just sat down at the kitchen table and stared at her hands. "How much?" she asked quietly. "All of it. Everything. The house fund. Gone. Your savings. Gone. The emergency money." I couldn't even say it. I just nodded. My savings account was getting dangerously low. The money I'd been putting aside for a house down payment was now being used to shore up my crypto positions. Every paycheck was going straight into my portfolio to avoid margin calls. Sarah could tell something was wrong. I was stressed all the time, checking my phone constantly, waking up in the middle of the night to see what the Asian markets were doing. "Jake, maybe it's time to step back from this," she said one morning over breakfast. I'd been up since 4 a.m. watching prices, trying to figure out if this was the bottom or if we were going to keep falling. "I can't step back now. If I sell now, I lock in the losses. This is temporary, Sarah. Markets go up and down. You have to have a long-term perspective." But my perspective was getting shorter and shorter every day. Every red candle on the charts felt personal. Every news article about crypto winter felt like an attack on my future. By February, I'd put in every dollar I had. My entire savings account. The money I'd been saving for a house. The emergency fund my dad always told me to keep. All of it was in crypto. All of it was disappearing. Sarah didn't know how bad it had gotten. I'd stopped showing her the numbers. I'd stopped talking about our millionaire future. When she asked how the investments were going, I'd just say fine, or we're holding steady. But I wasn't fine, and we definitely weren't holding steady. I was drowning in debt and denial, watching my future evaporate one red candle at a time. The call came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was at work, pretending to focus on inventory counts, when my phone buzzed with a notification from Binance. Margin call liquidation alert. My stomach dropped. I knew what it meant, but I checked anyway, hoping maybe it was a mistake, maybe the app was glitching. My entire position had been liquidated. $43,000 worth of crypto, sold automatically because I couldn't meet the margin requirements. But you know what I told myself? Temporary correction, healthy pullback, all part of the process. Every cryptocurrency journey has ups and downs, right? Every successful trader has to weather some storms. I'd read about this. The diamond hands mentality. HODL until death. Only weak hands sell during corrections. I posted in my Discord channels about buying the dip. I texted Mike about how this was a great opportunity to add more to our positions. What I didn't realize was that this was just the beginning. The first crack in the dam that was about to burst and wash away everything I'd built. January 2022 was brutal. Not just for me, for everyone in crypto. Bitcoin crash after Bitcoin crash. Every morning I'd wake up and check my phone, and every morning the numbers were worse. The news was full of stories about the Federal Reserve raising interest rates, about inflation, about risk-off sentiment in the markets. Suddenly, all the institutional money that had been flowing into crypto was flowing back out. 52 grand became 45, then 38, then 32. But here's the thing about leverage. When your collateral drops below a certain point, they send you a margin call. The platform automatically sells some of your position to protect you from losing more than you can afford. Except I kept adding more money to avoid liquidation. I kept putting more cash in, thinking I could ride it out, thinking this was just another dip that would bounce back like all the others. Mike was doing the same thing. We'd text each other constantly, trying to reassure ourselves that this was normal, that we just had to hold on, that the institutional money would come back. Diamond hands, we'd say. HODL. All those crypto memes that seemed so clever when we were making money. I wanted to tell him that I was about to be richer than he'd ever be, that his stupid warehouse job didn't matter anymore, that I was on the verge of financial freedom. But I just mumbled something about personal issues and promised to do better. Sarah and I barely talked about anything else anymore. Every conversation somehow came back to Bitcoin, to my investments, to our future millionaire lifestyle. She tried to talk about her day at work, about her friends, about normal life stuff, and I'd find a way to relate it back to crypto. I think you should take some profits, she said one night. We were having dinner, Chinese takeout from the place down the street, and I was explaining why I thought Ethereum was about to explode because of some upgrade called EIP 1559. Take profits? Now, Sarah, we're just getting started. The crypto market is barely mature. We're still early adopters. Taking profits now would be like selling Amazon stock in 1999. Jake, you've made so much money already. Why not take out what you put in? At least secure that? Then you can play with house money. I looked at her like she was crazy. Take out my initial investment? That was quitter talk. That was what scared money did. That was the kind of thinking that kept people poor their whole lives. Babe, you don't understand. This isn't just investing. This is generational wealth we're talking about. My kids are going to thank me for this. We're going to be set for life. She got quiet after that. Really quiet. The kind of quiet that should have been a warning sign. But I was too wrapped up in my own success to notice. 2 days later, Bitcoin dropped 15% in one day. My portfolio went from 67 grand to 52 grand in about 6 hours. $15,000. Gone. Just like that. I screenshot that number and stared at it for probably 10 minutes. This was more money than my dad had ever had in his savings account. This was more money than most people my age had ever seen. And I'd made it in 8 months from my phone while working at a warehouse. I sent it to Mike. I showed it to Sarah. even though she'd been getting more and more worried about my crypto obsession. "Look," I said, shoving my phone in her face while she was making coffee before work. "Look at this. We can put a down payment on a house. We can get married. We can do whatever we want." She looked at the number for a long time, then looked at me. "Jake, that's not real money until you sell it." But I wasn't selling. Why would I sell? Bitcoin was going to hit 100 grand, maybe 200 grand. Everyone said so. All the experts, all the influencers, all the YouTube crypto gurus I followed religiously. Plan B with his stock-to-flow model. Michael Saylor talking about digital property. Kathy Wood predicting Bitcoin would hit $500,000. I was going to be rich. Actually rich. Rich enough to quit my job, buy a house with cash, maybe start my own business. Rich enough to prove to everyone who'd ever doubted me that I wasn't just another warehouse worker. December was when I first felt something shift. Not in the markets, not yet. In me. I'd been so focused on my crypto portfolio that I'd basically stopped living my actual life. I was late to work constantly. When I was at work, I was distracted, checking prices, reading crypto news, planning my next moves. Rick pulled me aside one day, this short, balding guy who'd been managing the warehouse since before I was born. "Jake, what's going on with you lately? Your productivity is down. You're always on your phone. You called in sick 3 times last month." What they don't tell you, or what I was too excited to really understand, is that leverage cuts both ways. Sure, if Bitcoin goes up 10% and you're leveraged 3:1, you make 30%. But if it goes down 10%, well, you do the math. But I wasn't thinking about the downside. Bitcoin had been climbing for months. Every crypto story I read was about new all-time highs, institutional adoption, companies putting Bitcoin on their balance sheets. Tesla bought Bitcoin. MicroStrategy bought Bitcoin. El Salvador made it legal tender. Goldman Sachs was offering crypto services to their clients. This wasn't just some internet fad anymore. This was the future of money, and I was getting in early. The first time I used leverage, it was just a small amount. I borrowed against my position and bought more Bitcoin. Within a few days, I'd made more money than I'd make in 2 weeks at the warehouse. So I did it again. And again. Mike was doing the same thing. We'd text each other screenshots of our gains, celebrating every pump, analyzing every dip, convincing ourselves we were financial geniuses. "Dude, I just made 3 grand while I was sleeping." Mike texted me one morning. "Same here, man. This is insane." By October, I was controlling about 40 grand worth of crypto with maybe 8 grand of my actual money. The rest was borrowed. The rest was debt. But when you're making money that fast, debt doesn't feel scary. It feels like leverage. It feels like using other people's money to make yourself rich, which is exactly what every successful businessman does, right? I started reading books about real estate investing, about how rich people use debt to build wealth. I convinced myself that what I was doing was sophisticated, strategic, smart. When Bitcoin hit that peak in November, I felt like I was flying. My portfolio showed numbers I'd never seen before. $67,000. 67 grand. "Jake, you're different lately. You don't talk about anything else. When's the last time we went out and you didn't check your phone every 5 minutes?" I wanted to argue with her, but honestly, I couldn't remember. The crypto market never slept. Asia would be trading while I was sleeping, Europe would wake up and move prices, then the US markets would open. There was always something happening, always some news that could affect my portfolio. By August, my portfolio hit 15 grand. $15,000 from an initial investment of maybe 2 grand. I was up over 600%. 600%. Wall Street guys would kill for those returns. I was beating the professionals, and I was doing it from my couch, from my phone, during my lunch breaks. I screenshot that number and sent it to my dad. He called me that night, confused and worried. "Son, that seems too good to be true. Are you sure this is safe?" "Dad, Bitcoin is the future. Companies are putting it on their balance sheets. Countries are adopting it as legal tender. This isn't some scam. It's a fundamental shift in how money works." I could hear the skepticism in his voice, but I didn't care. He was old school, didn't understand technology, didn't see the bigger picture. He'd worked at the same factory for 30 years, saved his money in a regular bank account, invested in boring mutual funds. That was fine for his generation, but this was mine. That's when I made my first really stupid decision. I started using leverage. See, the thing about crypto trading platforms is they make it so easy to borrow money. They call it leverage, and they make it sound all professional and smart. "Amplify your gains," the ad said. "Maximize your Bitcoin investment potential." There were webinars about it, YouTube tutorials, whole communities dedicated to leveraged crypto trading. Guys were making screenshots of massive gains, 10x returns in a single day, stories that made my 600% gains look like pocket change. That's when things started getting weird. When I started believing my own hype. You ever notice how money changes the way you think? Not just about money, but about everything? I started looking at my warehouse job differently. All those 8-hour shifts, breaking my back moving boxes, dealing with Rick who treated us like we were beneath him. Why was I doing this? I was making more money in a week of Bitcoin trading than Rick probably made in a month. Well, on paper anyway. But paper money felt pretty real when you're watching it grow every single day. I started taking longer lunch breaks to check my portfolio. Started calling in sick when I wanted to research new cryptocurrency projects. There were so many opportunities out there. Ethereum was exploding. Something called Cardano was supposed to be the next big thing. Everyone was talking about DeFi and NFTs and all these acronyms that made me feel like I was part of some secret society. My girlfriend Sarah noticed I was always on my phone, always talking about crypto markets and Bitcoin rises and falls. We'd be watching Netflix, and I'd be checking prices. We'd be having dinner, and I'd be reading articles about blockchain adoption. "Jake, you're becoming obsessed," she said one night while we were supposed to be watching some romantic comedy she'd picked out. Except I wasn't really watching. I was checking prices on my phone for the 100th time that day, reading about how some institutional investor had just bought another $1 billion worth of Bitcoin. "I'm not obsessed, I'm focused," I shot back. "This is our future, Sarah. This crypto stuff could set us up for life. We could buy that house we've been talking about. We could travel. We could do whatever we want." She gave me this look, this worried, sad look that I should have paid more attention to. But I was too busy feeling like a crypto millionaire in the making. Within a week, my $50 was worth $63. $13 profit for doing absolutely nothing. I hadn't even looked at the app except to check the balance. My brain went nuts. $13 in a week. That's like, I started doing the math. If I could make that kind of return consistently, I could quit my job in a year. Maybe less. Hell, maybe I could retire before I was 30. So I bought more. $100 became $200. $200 became $500. Each time, Bitcoin kept climbing. Each time, I felt like I was getting smarter, like I was finally understanding something the rest of the world was missing. The blockchain technology, the decentralized future, the way cryptocurrency was going to change everything. I wasn't just investing, I was joining a revolution. At least, that's what I told myself as I watched those numbers climb higher and higher. Mike and I would spend hours watching YouTube videos about crypto trading. Guys with fancy setups, multiple monitors, talking about technical analysis and market patterns like they were reading the future. We'd read Reddit threads on our /cryptocurrency, follow every Bitcoin story we could find, join Discord channels where people shared tips and predictions. "This is it, man," Mike would say during our lunch breaks. This is our ticket out of this place." He'd gesture around the warehouse, at the concrete floors and fluorescent lights, at Rick, our supervisor, who treated us like we were barely human. "We're not going to be moving boxes forever." By summer, I had $4,000 in crypto. For grand that was worth almost 7. I felt like a genius. Like I'd cracked some secret code that regular people just didn't get. I'd check my portfolio constantly throughout the day, watching the numbers dance up and down, usually up. My coworkers started noticing. "Jake's always on his phone," they'd joke. "Probably texting his girlfriend." They had no idea I was watching my fortune grow in real time. "Nah, man," I'd tell Mike. "That crypto stuff is for tech bros and gamblers. I'm not trying to lose my shirt." But then Mike showed me his phone, his portfolio on some app called Coinbase. Dude had turned $3,000 into $12,000 in like 2 months. $12,000. That was more than I made in 6 months at the warehouse, more than I'd ever had in my savings account at one time. "Holy shit," I said, staring at those green numbers. The way they just sat there, mocking my regular paycheck, my careful budgeting, my boring savings account that earned maybe 50 cents a month in interest. Right? "And this is just the beginning, Jake. The crypto market is going crazy. Bitcoin's hitting new highs every week. My cousin in California, he made enough to buy a Tesla. A freaking Tesla, man." Mike started rattling off all these success stories he'd heard. People who'd become millionaires overnight. College kids who dropped out because they were making more trading cryptocurrency than their professors made in a year. Bitcoin stories that sounded too good to be true but were happening all around us. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those numbers. 12,000 from 3,000. What if I put in 5? What if I put in 10? What would that look like? I started doing math in my head, calculating returns, imagining what I could do with that kind of money. Sarah was sleeping next to me, peaceful and quiet, and I kept thinking about the engagement ring I'd been looking at online, the house we'd talked about buying, the vacation we'd been planning to take next summer. All of it suddenly felt possible with the kind of returns Mike was showing me. You know what happened next, don't you? I started small. Really small. Like, embarrassingly small. $50 on Coinbase, just to see what would happen. I remember creating the account, going through all the verification steps, linking my bank account. It felt official, like I was joining some exclusive club. Man, where do I even start with this one? You know that feeling when you're standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down, and your heart's pounding so hard you can hear it in your ears. That's exactly how I felt the morning I realized I'd lost everything. Everything. My savings, my house down payment, my girlfriend's trust. Hell, even my own sense of who I was. But let me back up a bit. Let me tell you how Jake from Ohio went from working double shifts at a warehouse to thinking he was the next Bitcoin millionaire. Because honestly, this crypto story needs to be told. Maybe it'll save someone else from making the same stupid mistakes I did. The thing is, I wasn't some reckless kid. I was 28, had a steady job, a girlfriend I loved, dreams of buying a house and starting a family. I was responsible, or at least I thought I was. But crypto, man, crypto has a way of making you feel like the rules don't apply to you anymore. It was March 2021. I remember because that's when my buddy Mike wouldn't shut up about Bitcoin. We're talking every lunch break, every text message, every time we grabbed a beer after work at Murphy's, this dive bar near the warehouse where we'd been going for years. "Jake, man, you gotta get in on this cryptocurrency journey," he'd say, eyes all lit up like he'd discovered fire or something. Mike was this stocky guy from Cleveland, worked the same shifts I did, drove the same beat-up Honda Civic he'd had since high school. But suddenly he was talking like some Wall Street hotshot. I wasn't having it at first. I mean, come on. I was working my ass off, trying to save up for a decent life. Bitcoin investment sounded like gambling to me, and I'd seen enough of that growing up. My old man lost plenty on scratch-offs and poker games at the VFW hall. I'd watched him come home with empty pockets too many times, my mom giving him that look of disappointment that could cut glass.